Question number 4, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister and asks, what did he mean in his reported statement that, and I quote him, "We're considering what we can do to resist a rising exchange rate," end of quotes. And how does he reconcile this statement with that given by the Associate Minister of Finance on behalf of the Minister of Finance yesterday, to the effect that the New Zealand Government has absolutely no way of influencing the New Zealand dollar down?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I meant that the government is taking a number of steps to help take pressure off the exchange rate and help the economy adapt to a relatively high currency. They include getting back to fiscal surplus so that the government is not borrowing heavily and pushing up interest rates, encouraging households to save, and putting the right settings in place to help New Zealand firms become more competitive. The Associate Minister correctly referred to the fact that with a floating exchange rate, there is nothing the government can do to permanently bring down the value of the dollar without also having undesirable effects show up elsewhere in the economy.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Has he considered any alternative counter-inflationary measures to curb excessive bank lending and thereby ease pressure on the exchange rate caused by interest rates?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, my understanding is that Alan Bollard, in his capacity as Governor, has actually moved in that area. There's been quite a number of changes over the last few years where the Reserve Bank now has much greater capacity to limit the loan-to-value ratios that banks have and their capital requirements under Basel III.
The Honourable David Parker.
Does the Prime Minister agree with the outgoing Governor of the Reserve Bank that if the objectives of the Reserve Bank Act were wider and included more than giving primacy to inflation, but other matters like the level of a competitive exchange rate, the decisions taken by the Reserve Bank would be different, and the exchange rate, and this is not his words but they're mine, so I don't want to attribute it to him, but the exchange rate might be lower?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with the greatest respect to that member, I think he is actually misquoting Alan Bollard. The member will be aware that Alan Bollard, as Reserve Bank Governor, was before the Select Committee. In fact, what he said about the current legislation is that it is, quote unquote, completely fit for purpose. And so, in my view, and knowing a number of discussions I've had with the Governor in the 4 years I've been Prime Minister, he has concluded that, in fact, New Zealand has world-leading legislation when it comes to the way that we manage the exchange rate and inflation targeting. Interestingly enough, also, that member will know that because he was part of a government that had Charles Chauvel chair the Select Committee for FEC in 2008. And what that Select Committee found was the following. It found that New Zealand's monetary policy approach is now standard among small, open, developed economies. It is regarded as, quote unquote, world's best practice. We advise that there are more than 20 countries now using a similar approach to monetary policy.
Point of order, the Honourable David Parker.
I don't deny the Prime Minister's quote, but I wasn't referring to that quote, and I seek leave to table the transcript of Dr Bollard at the Select Committee where he acknowledged the point that I made in my question.
I understand that this is publicly available from the Select Committee. Point of order, the Honourable David Parker.
Well, then my other point of order would be then that the Prime Minister obviously hasn't addressed my question.
Order. The Prime Minister absolutely did address the question. He answered it quite explicitly in that he... Order. No, the Prime Minister, the member in asking his question acknowledged that towards the end of his question he may have used words that were not exactly Dr Bollard's words. And in answering the question, the Prime Minister pointed out what Dr Bollard had said to the Select Committee, and while it may not be exactly the answer the member expected, it's certainly an answer to that question. Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Millard.
And it goes to the availability of the transcript. My understanding is that the transcript is not available until the report back from the Select Committee.
Let me just check that fact.
And it hasn't been reported back yet.
I accept the member is correct there, and therefore I will put it to the House. Leave has sought to table that document. Is there any objection?
Yes, there is.
There is objection. The Right Honourable Winston Peters, supplementary question.
Having regard to the Prime Minister's marvellous ideological theory doing nothing about the soaring dollar rate at 82, 83 US, has he considered the use of capital controls as a means of reducing the inflow of hot money, which is causing our high dollar?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, look, I think from time to time it would be fair to summarise that the Reserve Bank and the Treasury always look at those broader issues as they look at the general view about whether the policy targets agreement and the set between the Governor and the Minister of Finance is working appropriately. What I think the general conclusion, although I may have to go back and have a look, is that it's very difficult to put capital controls on a country like New Zealand, which is a large capital importer and relies on that capital to fund so much of our domestic investment. It may be possible in a place like Singapore. It's actually not possible in a place like New Zealand, I think, easily.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
That being the case, why did he say that the government is, and I quote him, considering what it can do to resist a rising exchange rate, end of quotes, when it is clear from his previous three answers that he never intended to do anything whilst on average 100 manufacturing jobs are being lost every week and the high dollars cost exporters a total of over $10 billion since 2009.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, if I accept the member doesn't have that because he got it out of a Wall Street Journal approach, but if the member wants me to give him the full transcript of the entire conversation I had with the Wall Street Journal, I'm more than happy to do that. What I actually went on to say, or did say as part of that overall discussion with that journalist, was that New Zealand, that I don't believe in intervention as a mechanism that works, that New Zealand's broadly happy with the policy target agreement that we've got. What I basically said was that the government, there's only certain things the government can control. They are the things like the inputs for businesses, and whether it's reforming armour and aid, tax reform, employment law reform, all of those things do take the pressure off our exporters. And the reality is that if the member really thinks that we can, if the member really thinks that he can get the New Zealand dollar down while it remains a floating exchange rate, then he needs to go away and read a few books, because I give him a clue, it doesn't work.
Point of order, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, with the greatest respect, I've read a few books, including about Merrill Lynch.
Order. The member will resume his seat. I can't for the life of me see what that's got to do with the proceedings of this House. It's not a point of order, and the member will not pursue. He cannot disagree with the Prime Minister's answer by way of point of order. The Prime Minister answered the member's question in a very fulsome way, because he referred to the quote that the member used in his question. He went on to explain how that quote fitted into an interview the Prime Minister was giving. I think probably went a bit far at the end there, but can't litigate the answer by way of point of order. The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
I'm not litigating the answer at all. The answer was fine until he started recommending that other members of this House read books. That's when he was out of order.
Order, I accept that he shouldn't have done that indeed, but worse things happen across the floor of the House than that, unfortunately. But I accept the member's point. The Prime Minister should not have added that. But order, I'm on my feet. And the interjections from the Honourable Gentleman is better than some of his interjections today. Order, I cannot hear what the Right Honourable Gentleman's seeking. Is this a supplementary question?
No, I wish to table a document given that the Prime Minister disputed what my authority was. And I wish to table this NBR review dated on 17/4/2012.
Order, no, we don't table press clippings from newspapers. Question number 5, Dr. Paul Hutchison.